Tutankhamun is one of the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty in ancient Egyptian history, and he was the pharaoh of Egypt from 1325 BC to 1334 BC. Tutankhamun is considered one of the most famous pharaohs for reasons not related to his achievements or wars he won, as is the case with many pharaohs, but for other reasons that are considered important from a historical point of view, the most prominent of which is the discovery of his tomb and its treasures in full without any damage. The mystery surrounding the circumstances of his death, as many considered the death of a pharaoh at a very young age to be unnatural, especially with the presence of traces of fractures in the thigh bones and skull, and the marriage of his minister to his widow after his death, and the appointment of himself as pharaoh. All these mysterious events, and the extensive use of the legend of the curse of the pharaohs associated with the tomb of Tutankhamun, which was used in films and video games, made Tutankhamun the most famous pharaoh for mysteries and questions that remain unanswered, and some considered it one of the oldest assassinations in human history. Tutankhamun died young and was buried in his tomb, Tomb 62, in the Valley of the Kings. Tutankhamun was 9 years old when he became pharaoh of Egypt. His name in ancient Egyptian means the living image of the god Amun, the chief god of ancient Egypt. Tutankhamun lived in a transitional period in the history of ancient Egypt, coming after Akhenaten, who tried to unify the gods of ancient Egypt in the form of a single god. During his reign, the worship of the many gods of ancient Egypt returned. His tomb was discovered in 1922 in the Valley of the Kings by British archaeologist Howard Carter. This discovery caused a widespread media uproar in the world. During the reign of Tutankhamun, a revolution began in Tel El Amarna against the movement of the previous pharaoh Akhenaten, who moved the capital from Thebes to his new capital, Akhetaten in Minya, and tried to unify the many gods of ancient Egypt, including the god Amun, in the form of the single god Aten. In 1331 BC, in the third year of the reign of Tutankhamun, who was 11 years old, and under the influence of the vizier I, the ban on the worship of the gods was lifted. There is a prevailing belief that Tutankhamun's death was not due to illness, but rather may have been the result of an assassination plot orchestrated by the minister Khepri Re-I. There is much evidence provided by believers in this theory, including, for example, the marriage of the minister Khepri Re-I to Tutankhamun's widow, where a pharaonic seal bearing the name I and Anksun Amun, the widow of Tutankhamun, was found. There is also a letter sent by Anksun Amun, the widow of Tutankhamun, to the Hittite king asking him to send one of his sons to marry her after her husband's death. The Hittite king sent one of his sons to marry Tutankhamun's widow, but he died before entering Egypt. There is a belief that he was most likely assassinated by the plot of the minister Khepri Re-I, who apparently was planning to seize the throne of Egypt, so he killed King Tutankhamun and the son of the Hittite king. However, these are hypotheses, and there is no conclusive evidence to prove all of these theories. It is worth noting that historical evidence indicates that there were two ministers for Tutankhamun, one of whom was I, who was mentioned, and the other was named Horemheb. There is archaeological evidence confirming that after the death of Tutankhamun, Minister I took over the reins of power for a short period to be replaced by the second minister Horemheb, during whose reign most of the evidence of the reign of Tutankhamun and Minister I was destroyed. This confirms for some the conspiracy theory that Tutankhamun died due to malaria, which was widespread in the south. For a long time, the cause of Tutankhamun's death was a controversial issue, and there were many conspiracy theories that suggested that he did not die but was killed in an assassination attempt. On March 8, 2005, as a result of using three-dimensional CT scans on the mummy of Tutankhamun, Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass stated that there is no evidence that Tutankhamun was assassinated. He added that the hole in his skull was not due to a blow to the head as previously believed, but rather this hole was created after death for the purpose of mummification. Zahi Hawass explained the fracture in the left femur, which has long been linked to the assassination theory, as a result of a fracture in the femur that Tutankhamun suffered before his death, and perhaps the inflammation resulting from this fracture caused his death. Recent analyses have also shown that the bone of the roof of the oral cavity of Tutankhamun was not complete, and Tutankhamun's height was 170 centimeters, and the transverse length of his skull was greater than the normal length, which led some to suggest Marfan syndrome as a cause of early death. This condition is hereditary and is transmitted through dominant autosomal genes. The final report of the Egyptian archaeological team was that the cause of death was blood poisoning resulting from the fracture of the thigh bone that Tutankhamun suffered, which led to gangrene, which is the death of cells and tissues and their decomposition as a result of the secretion of enzymes from dead muscles due to the lack of oxygen reaching them through the blood. Before this report, there were attempts to determine the cause of death using X-rays on Tutankhamun's mummy, which were conducted at the University of Liverpool and the University of Michigan in 1968 and 1978, respectively. The two universities discovered a dark spot under the back of Tutankhamun's skull, which was interpreted as a brain hemorrhage, which led to the spread of the hypothesis that he had received a blow to the head that led to a brain hemorrhage and then death. A study published in March 2010 showed that the cause of Tutankhamun's death was malaria and complications from a broken leg. The study also indicated the presence of some genetic diseases resulting from a genetic defect inherited in the family. The Valley of the Kings, located on the west bank of the Nile near Thebes, served for 450 years during the New Kingdom of the ancient Egyptians, which lasted from 1539 to 1075 BC, as a cemetery for the pharaohs of that period. In this rocky valley, which covers an area of approximately 20,000 square meters, there are 27 royal tombs dating back to 3 dynasties: the 18th dynasty, the 19th dynasty, and the 20th dynasty, which have been discovered to date. It is believed that the valley contains at least 30 other tombs that have not yet been discovered. The tombs discovered in the Valley of the Kings so far, according to the chronological order of the rule of the pharaohs, go back to Thutmose I, Amenhotep II, Tutankhamun, and Horemheb, who are from the 18th dynasty of Egypt, Ramses I, Seti I, Ramses II, Amenmesse, Seti II, and Siptah, who are from the 19th dynasty of Egypt, and Setnakht, Ramses III, Ramses IV, Ramses V, and Ramses IX, who are from the 20th dynasty of Egypt. There are other tombs of unknown pharaohs, and attempts are still underway to identify them. The construction of the pharaoh's tomb usually began a few days after he was appointed pharaoh of Egypt, and the construction usually took dozens of years. The workers used simple tools such as an axe to dig long trenches and form small rooms in the valley. Over time, tombs were built on top of other tombs, and digging new tunnels and trenches often led to the blockage of the corridors leading to the tomb of the oldest pharaoh. This lack of organized planning was the main reason that led to the preservation of these treasures and their not being exposed to theft for thousands of years. On November 4, 1922, when the British archaeologist and specialist in the history of ancient Egypt Howard Carter was excavating at the entrance to the tunnel leading to the tomb of Ramses VI in the Valley of the Kings, he noticed a large cellar and continued to excavate carefully until he entered the room containing the tomb of Tutankhamun. On the walls of the room containing the tomb were wonderful drawings that told, in the form of pictures, the story of Tutankhamun's departure to the world of the dead. The scene was very wonderful for the scientist Howard Carter, who was looking at the room through an opening with a candle in his hand. It is said that his assistant asked him, "Can you see anything?" Carter answered, "Yes, I see wonderful things." On February 16, 1923, Howard Carter, 1874-1939, was the first person in more than 3,000 years to set foot on the floor of the room containing the coffin of Tutankhamun. Carter noticed a wooden box with gold inlays in the middle of the room. When he lifted the box, he noticed that the box was covering a second box decorated with gold inlays. When he lifted the second box, he noticed that the second box was covering a third box inlaid with gold. When he lifted the third box, Carter reached the stone coffin, which was covered with a thick layer of carved stone in the shape of a statue of Tutankhamun. When he lifted this stone cover, Carter reached the main golden coffin, which was in the shape of a statue of Tutankhamun. This golden coffin was covering two other golden coffins in the shape of statues of the young pharaoh. Howard had difficulty lifting the third golden shroud that covered Tutankhamun's mummy from the mummy, so Carter thought that exposing the shroud to the blazing heat of the Egyptian summer sun would be enough to separate the golden shroud from the mummy, but his attempts failed, and he was finally forced to cut the golden shroud in half to reach the mummy, which was wrapped in layers of silk. After removing the cloth shroud, he found Tutankhamun's mummy in full decorations of necklaces, rings, a crown, and a staff, all of which were made of pure gold. To remove these artifacts, the excavation team had to separate the skull and main bones from their joints. After removing the jewelry, the team reassembled the mummy skeleton and placed it in a wooden coffin. In February 2010, the Egyptian Ministry of Tourism decided to allow the mummy of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun to be displayed to the public for the first time since its discovery with its golden shrine in the city of Luxor 85 years ago. Zahi Hawass, director of the Egyptian Antiquities Authority, said that Egyptian scientists began more than 2 years ago to restore the mummy of Pharaoh Tutankhamun, which was severely damaged after it was briefly removed from its stone coffin during a CT scan. He added that the largest part of the mummy's body was fragmented into 18 pieces that looked like stones that were broken when British archaeologist Howard Carter first discovered it and removed it from its tomb, and tried to remove the golden mask that covered King Tutankhamun's face. He pointed out that the mystery surrounding Tutankhamun and his golden tomb has aroused the curiosity and enthusiasm of fans of ancient Egyptology since Carter discovered the mummy's location on November 4, 1922, and the treasures of gold and precious stones it hid. In 2005, scientists removed the mummy of Tutankhamun from its tomb and placed it on a CT scan table for a quarter of an hour in order to obtain a three-dimensional image of a mummy that is more than 3,000 years old. The results of the medical examination ruled out that the young pharaoh was murdered, but they could not accurately determine the manner of his death, which occurred in 1323 BC. The images revealed that King Tutankhamun suffered a fracture in his left thigh, most likely due to an accident, which later led to him contracting a fatal disease that could not be identified. The images also provided an unprecedented revelation at the time about the life of the young pharaoh, who is considered one of the most famous kings of ancient Egypt. Among them is that he was healthy due to his good nutrition despite his relatively thin build, which did not exceed 170 centimeters in height when he died. There are strange things that happen to everyone who enters it. For example, the first scientist to discover it died of poisoning, and some believe that it was due to the food, while others believe that it was due to the curse of the pharaohs. Attempts to uncover the mystery of his death. On February 17, 2010, Zahi Hawass, Secretary General of the Supreme Council of Antiquities at the time, announced in a press conference in the garden of the Egyptian Museum a set of scientific discoveries that solve many of the mysteries of the end of the 18th dynasty, including the mystery of the death of Tutankhamun. By analyzing the DNA of King Tut's mummy, the results showed that the cause of death was due to the malaria parasite, and it is likely that the complications resulting from the disease led to his death. DNA analysis and CT scan of Tutankhamun's mummy also revealed that King Akhenaten was King Tut's father. The results also revealed that genetic and hereditary diseases played a role in Tutankhamun's death, as he suffered from a genetic defect inherited in the family, and there was weakness and diseases in these mummies, as well as problems related to the heart and blood vessels. When researchers scanned Tutankhamun's mummy, they discovered that he had many diseases, such as a hump in his spine, in addition to a deformity of the big toe, which led to atrophy in his left foot. Hawass said that the ancient drawings depicted Tutankhamun shooting arrows while sitting in a horse-drawn chariot, not while standing, which is unusual. In his tomb, we found 100 walking sticks, and at first we thought they represented power and strength, but it turned out that they were old crutches that he used as he could barely walk. Hawass also explained that the computer scan of the mummy in 2005 aimed to verify that he was killed, as previous X-ray images revealed a hole in his skull, adding that it turned out that this hole was made during the mummification process, but a fracture was discovered in the left leg bone which may have played a role in the death of the young pharaoh. The importance of Tutankhamun's treasures. The importance of King Tutankhamun's collection is due to many reasons. The first is that King Tutankhamun's treasure is the most complete royal treasure ever found and is unparalleled, as it consists of 358 pieces, including the golden mask, the wonderful, and 3 coffins in the shape of a human, one of pure gold and the other 2 of gilded wood. That these belongings date back to the 18th dynasty, the most famous and most prosperous era of the modern state, when the country opened up to the regions of the ancient Near East thanks to military campaigns and trade relations from the export and import of resources and manufactured products and the activity of craftsmen and artists. That this huge collection remained in Egypt and shows how the royal tomb was prepared, as there are daily life items such as dolls and toys, then a group of complete furniture, tools, and war equipment, statues of gods related to the burial of the king and the rituals performed for him, and the famous trumpet of Tutankhamun made of silver and another of copper, and all these contents are now in the Egyptian Museum in Cairo. From this treasure or huge collection, we learn a lot about the life of the king and his love of hunting and his relationship with his wife Ankhesenamun, who is believed to be his relative, in addition to knowing his most important works and his entourage, and finally the only throne chair that has come down to us from the ancient Egyptian civilization.